China and Somalia are working to rekindle diplomatic and economic relations following a new reconstruction deal signed in Mogadishu. The deal is part of a 5-year reconstruction plan to be facilitated by the Chinese government and will help the recovery in Somalia through the reconstruction of the Banadir Hospital, which is the country's biggest referral facility, the revival of Mogadishu Stadium and the National Theatre. Recently, Somalia's Foreign Minister Fazia Haji Adam led a delegation of Somali ministers on a special visit to Beijing, with the construction of the Chinese embassy in Mogadishu expected to begin soon. The Chinese will also assist in the rebuilding of the highway between Galkayo and Birao in the north of Somalia.
China and Somalia have shared very strong ties since we established our diplomatic relations in 1960. And Somalia is the first country which established diplomatic relationship with China in East Africa. So we are very good friends, and China is ready to contribute its own share for the national reconstruction of Somalia. And China is a good friend of Somalia, and we will do our best for your economic development and the livelihood of the peoples.
This is their first arrival. They will see the land where they will establish their embassy. They will refurbish the Banadir Hospital, the Mogadishu Stadium, and reconstruct the National Theatre. They have promised us other big projects which we signed with them.
China has pledged a grant of about $43 million to finance improvements of South Sudan's mining industry. The funds are expected to arrive by the end of September. Among the projects meant to be funded include a geological survey that will help to map out the country's mining reaches. Geological surveys conducted in the 1970s show that South Sudan may have rich deposits of gold, copper and uranium. But since those surveys were conducted, South Sudan's mineral resources have remained unexploited. The parliament there passed a mining law in March that allows international firms to receive 5-year exploration permits. The first step toward getting a permit is a geological survey, which would indicate where a company should dig. South Sudan is also in early stages of talks with China about a development loan of about $2 billion and about further Chinese investments in South Sudan's petroleum and mining industries. Now, the Qatari government will convert the $2 billion it had deposited in the Central Bank of Egypt into bonds, according to Governor Hesham Ramez. The funds are expected to be converted into bonds within a week. The Qatari government last week requested the conversion to be delayed after the Egyptian government said that it was willing to pay the money within days. Cairo's relations with Doha have deteriorated since the Egyptian army deposed President Mohamed Morsi on July 3rd following mass protests against his rule. Qatar had firmly backed the government of Morsi, who hails from the Muslim Brotherhood, and provided Egypt with $7.5 billion during his brief 1-year tenure. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait have stepped in as Egypt's new patrons and have pledged a total of $12.5 billion in loans, grants and shipments. And still in Egypt, a group of entrepreneurial Egyptians are cashing in on a recent political wave to support Egyptian Army Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi for the presidency by selling chocolate printed with his face to his supporters. The move has seen the Cacao Chocolate Lounge in Cairo launch a selection of delectable treats painted with the face of the general. CCTV's Peter Akaba with the details.
Nestled in the midst of local schools and embassies in the quiet Garden City neighborhood, Cacao welcomes customers with an array of chocolates imprinted with the face of Al-Sisi, a hero to many for his role in the ousting of former President Mohamed Morsi. Cafe owner Bahira Gala says business has been brisk. She left the tourism industry following the Egyptian Revolution of 25th January 2011, when work for tour guides collapsed, and opened a small chocolate lounge. And after the military deposed Morsi on July the 3rd, Galal decided to show her appreciation and support for Sisi through her sweets.
I'm
outside of the political scene completely. A group of tour guides that I know created a page on Facebook in support of Sisi. Every supporter of Sisi does their own thing and expresses their support in their own way. So for me, it got me thinking of printing his face on the chocolates I make.
Small coin-shaped delicacies and larger chocolate frames bear the image of the military man Galal believes to be Egypt's savior. Displayed in glass cases and on tabletops, customers can enjoy the imported Belgian chocolates either sitting in the cafe or take away as a treat.
I think this is something that can be put down in history, and we can grow older. We can tell our children how there was once a symbol who was loved and supported by so many Egyptians, and it is from this love that this idea chocolates was born. And it is relevant to our culture because we Egyptians love sweet things, and here Bahira was able to blend the two together harmoniously.
The chocolates are a hit with cacao customers. Bahira sells them by the piece and says sometimes customers fondly ask for 1 kilo of sisi, thus enabling them enjoy a treat and also show their political affiliation. Peter Wakaba, CCTV.
The South Africa Public Enterprises Minister Malusi Gigaba has unveiled a new turnaround plan intended to bring the airline back to profitability. According to the turnaround strategy, which is expected to span a 12-year period, South Africa Airways will focus on its domestic and African routes in a bid to return to profitability. Minister Gigaba said that the plan would be implemented in a speedy and unyielding manner, stressing that failure was not an option. The strategy outlined that increased efficiency, cost savings and fleet renewal would be central to the plan. Government employees would also be required to exclusively use the airline for work travel. South Africa sold $2 billion worth of 12-year bonds in overseas debt markets after boosting the size of the offering. The country issued the bonds to mature in 2025 at a yield of 6% or 3.15 percentage points above U.S. Treasuries. The 6% it agreed to pay is up from 4.665% or 270 basis points above U.S. Treasuries when it sold notes due in 2024 in January 2012. South Africa tapped the market after investors pulled $22.1 billion from emerging market bond funds since the end of April amid speculation the U.S. will curb stimulus. According to EPFR Global, the withdrawals are almost 5 times the amount taken out of U.S. corporate debt. Well, let's now get the latest from the South African economy. We are joined by CCTV's Sumitra Naidu. She is live for us from Johannesburg. So, Sumitra, the biggest news from the South African economy, of course, has been on the labour unrest. Tell us more about that. What's the latest?
Well, Panina, there's been some relief in the gold sector. Harmony Gold was the last gold company to accede to an 8% wage increase, bringing the gold strike to an end. SAA workers have also ended their strike action. However, the construction and the motor industry strikes are continuing. Now, both strikes in their 3rd week. Workers in the retail motor industry, these are petrol attendants and dealership workers belonging to the National Union of Metal Workers South Africa. A further 30,000 members joining the strike on Monday, also demanding higher wages. The strikes have raised some concerns about violence. There have been some reports in the last few days of intimidation of petrol attendants. Also worries about the impact it's having on the economy, so it's not looking good.
So, Sumitra, there's been concerns, of course, about the impact of this labour unrest on the economy and also the damage it may have caused on potential, economic prospects. But despite these concerns, Sumitra, today we saw South Africa enjoy a strong bond auction. How come?
Well, that's right. And analysts seem to think that investors are still very bullish on South Africa. Of course, we do have a good credit rating. We have a sovereign rating, a really good one still. And we've never really had a problem in the bond market. And we seem to be defying the weakness that we're seeing at the moment. And yes, as you say, South Africa went to the international market with 12-year bonds on auction and received just over 2 billion rand, $2 billion rather, for that. These are bonds due in 2025 with a 6% yield, which analysts say is still quite good good. The bonds remain an attractive long-term investment. U.S. Treasuries offer half of that at just over 3%. So the strikes in the weak economy does mean a higher risk, but investors are still, as I say, bullish and confident on South Africa and the African growth story. Panina?
Right, Sumitra, let's talk about South African Airways, which has unveiled a strategy to turn around the loss-making airline. What does this strategy entail?
Well, it's a 12-year strategy. It's a turnaround strategy, as we've been told. And we heard this from Parliament. We haven't really seen the strategy as yet. But from what we understand, the airline wants to expand and focus on domestic and regional African routes. The strategy also envisages merging all the state's aviation assets. So that's SAA, South African Express, and its low-cost subsidiary, Mango Airline. This, it believes, will reduce running costs. Now, cost saving, one of the key pillars of the strategy, along with increased efficiency and fleet renewal. As part of the strategy, SAA also wants all government departments to exclusively use SAA for work travel. Now, the airline reported a 1.2 billion rand loss last year. It's expected to report another loss this year, and it is currently operating with a 5 billion rand credit guarantee from the government. This, of course, is the 9th strategy for the airline. None have really worked, and analysts are really skeptical on whether this ambitious turnaround strategy is actually going to be the answer for SAA at this stage.
Oh, wow, a tense moment there indeed for SAA. Thanks very much, Sumitra, for joining us. Sumitra Naidu live for us from South Africa. You're watching BizAfrica. Let's take a break coming up. Mauritius seeks to diversify its economy. We'll be bringing you the details next.
BizAsia. Asia means business.
Welcome back to BizAfrica. Ethiopian Airlines has signed a $22 million loan agreement with PTA Bank in a bid to finance the first phase of its airline staff housing project. The project will see close to 1,192 houses built for various employees. It is part of the effort undertaken by the airline to retain its human resources who otherwise migrate to the developed world in search of better employment opportunities with amenities that include housing. Ethiopian Airlines made a record profit, which the company's chief executive officer, Gabriel Mariam, partly credited to Boeing's problematic 787 planes. The company's operating profit between July 2012 and June 2013 is about $143.2 million from some $53 million the previous financial year.
So today we have signed a loan agreement between us for a project, a housing project for Ethiopian Airlines employees. It's about 1,192 housing units. First phase of the project. So we value our people and we do our level best to support them. So this project is to alleviate the housing problem that exists in the city.
The Indian Ocean island of Mauritius has overtaken South Africa as the most competitive country in sub-Saharan Africa, becoming the highest-ranked country in the region. Mauritius was placed 43rd, 9 positions ahead of Africa's economic powerhouse South Africa, thanks to its openness to foreign direct investment. Here's a closer look at just what has been behind the country's recent economic upturn.
Mauritius has a gross domestic product of more than $11 billion and a per capita income of over $8,500, making it one of the highest in Africa. The country's economy has over the years developed from a low-income, agriculturally based economy to a middle-income, diversified economy with growing financial and industrial sectors.
Mauritius has to reinvent itself. Mauritius has to believe in its own people and try to find new markets. We cannot sustain the model that has been our model for the past 25 years.
The World Economic Forum averages economic growth rate in sub-Saharan Africa at an impressive 5%, with Mauritius topping the leaderboard for the 5th consecutive year. It's the most preferred place to invest on in the continent. Despite a decline in major contributors to its economy like sugar, textile and tourism in 2005 due to the European economic crisis, Mauritius authorities undertook bold economic reform programs to widen the spectrum of the economy, inclining its trajectory upwards ever since.
And it's time for a paradigm shift, and it's time to have new leaders in Mauritius, new political leaders, people that think differently, that are not talking about the past all the time, but thinking about the future and living in the present.
This year, things could not look better for the island nation. By regional standards, its ports, employment opportunities, transport sector and financial markets bear witness to an economy on all engines go. Noel Makugu, CCTV.
Right, so just before we wrap up business, let's take a look at some of the major bourses we track for you from the continent. Kind of mixed bag here. The Nigeria All Share Index ending the day in the red with almost 1%. The JSE All Share Index ending in the green with almost 1.5%. The Nairobi Securities Exchange ending the day flat. Then finally, the EGX ending the day in the green with 3.11%. So how about we call it a day here on BizAfrica? Thanks for watching. I'm Penina Karibet. Back to you, Beatrice, for sports.